2015. We're at the Alexander Black House in Blacksburg, Virginia, and this is an oral history of Blacksburg historian, photographer, native John Kline. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
You were born in Blacksburg?
No, we came here in 1956. My dad was in Ag Econ, and we moved to Blacksburg, Airport Acres, which is a great place. Rose Avenue, right down from Sandy Airfield Base. The Huckleberry went by, and we can start there. When we came to Blacksburg, we stayed at the Colonial Hotel, right downtown. It's right on Main Street, across from the post office. I think that was the first year, when we first moved here. I started first grade in the old grade school building. Walked across the field that was right in front of the grade school, which later I ended up at with my store. So I guess it was destiny, you know. I was for downtown. I've always, I won't say I've always enjoyed being downtown, but I will admit, I left school many times a little bit early, if you know what I mean, and either walked on downtown. I mean, I remember lunches. Well, you know, you could eat at the lunchroom, or you could take your 25 cents and you could go to Tech Drug and get a cheese sandwich and a Coke for a quarter. Or you could go to SAB, get a hot dog and probably a Coke for a quarter. You know, so your choices. Now, I know you're supposed to stay on school property and all that, but I did like downtown. I always have.
Now, what is SAB? What was SAB?
Student Activity Building, Squires.
And that was on College Avenue?
That was on College Avenue. So everything was downtown. You know, after school, you'd walk downtown, all the stores that were there. You know, in 56, we had 4 hardware stores downtown. Reed Harden had Western Auto. Mr. Rodinger, he had Rodinger's Hardware. Mr. Burris, he had Blacksburg Hardware. And it seems like, right up the street here, I can't think of his name, across from the Huckleberry, there was another hardware store there.
There was a lumber company.
Lumber company.
Blacksburg
Sure,
Lumber.
Blacksburg Lumber, Mr. Lipsky.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he had the lumber company. That was a hardware. So we probably had 5. Okay, so you know you could get your supplies. We had drug stores. We had Tech Drug, Corner Drug, Center Drug. You could get your drugs. We had women's shops. I think there was Louise's. I don't remember all the women's shops. I know we had the men's shops. We had Algebrights, the Davidsons.
And what stores are there now in 2015 where Algebright's was, for instance?
Well, Algebrights was right on the corner. That was where Sharpie's is now.
Okay.
The Elliott Building. What else we had? We had our drug stores. We had our hardware stores. We had the hobby shop. Oh man, Mr. Brown had the hobby shop right on the corner from College Avenue and Water Street, which is Draper Road, and it has a good reason for that. You had the hobby shop. That was a great building. I mean, as a kid, you know, you didn't have toy shops. You had, well, actually we did. We had the hobby shop, and we had upstairs of Blacksburg Hardware, which was the Burris's, and they would only open this up at Christmas. They had an elevator. If you go into Champs now, downstairs, you can see the old elevator that would go upstairs. You'd pull a rope and pull you up. Well, Robert Banks and I used to go in there all the time. Mrs. Burris she'd chase us out of there. We'd go up to the toy shop. and be looking around. They had rockets. They had all kinds of great toys. You know, we didn't have a Walmart. We didn't have any toy places like that. We had a couple stores that patronize. I mean, at Christmas, Santa would be there. He'd come to the Lyric, and he'd come to the Burris's Hardware, the toy shop. What else do we have? That's
Western Auto.
Western Auto. Reed Harden. He's got to be one of my heroes of Blacksburg. This man had everything in that store. I mean, there was everything. You could go in there. Now, I did like to play around with, I won't say explosives, but I like to make things bang a lot.
Yeah.
Carbides, if you want to go caving, you go get your carbide. There's a big can of it there. Sell it by the pound. If you want to get carried away and make your own black muzzle, your own gun, or make a firecracker, you can buy gunpowder.
Did you make firecrackers?
Oh, I made everything. I mean, I had a good time. Go over to Tech Drug Store, and my mother had bought us a World Book Encyclopedia, so you could look up how the Chinese made gunpowder. Or down the basement, my poor parents. I mean, you'd make whatever, smoke bombs and whatever, just to make things. You could not get away with that today. There's just no way. They'd be reading about me.
So you had a lot of fun with all of that.
I always had a lot of fun. Blacksburg, growing up in Blacksburg has been a real experience. And it sort of goes in spurts. I'm 65 now, so my first 20 years before I started my store, I enjoyed it. I mean, I was not the scholar that I probably should have been, like my sister and my father, mother.
But you were out having fun.
I mean, like, how many people can remember going to the Lyric Theater? Well, sure, we went to the Lyric Theater. I think one of the first movies I ever saw there was The Shaggy Dog.
The Shaggy Dog.
But how many people can remember going to the Lyric Theater or going in the theater through the back door and sitting behind the screen and watching the movies backwards?
You did.
Oh, now I mean, this was Blacksburg. And, a group of the kids, we all enjoyed Blacksburg.
Yes.
Or getting on the train, the Huckleberry.
Huckleberry.
You could ride the Huckleberry from Blacksburg to Christiansburg for a quarter. Or you could get on the Huckleberry right when it started downtown on the tracks, jump in one of the cars, and jump off into Sandy Airfield's base, the sand. It wasn't a very fast-moving train anyway.
That's why they called it the Huckleberry.
Well, it was called the Huckleberry because it was so slow you could jump off, pick huckleberries, and jump back on.
Yes. Now, when you talk about the Sandy Airfield, you're talking about
By the airport.
that would be the part
From Airport Acres
across
straight across.
to
From
what
the
is
very
now the
end
Research
of,
Center.
say take Rose Avenue and go straight across. Airport's on the left. Yeah.
So was that an Army term or that's?
I
just
guess
how
it was.
known, Sandy
I-
Airfield.
I guess it was. I mean, it was definitely sandy.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if they used it for training. I really don't. But
Mm-hmm.
that's. I mean, I actually didn't stop a plane, but I bugged the people down there enough as a kid till one of them finally gave me a ride in a yellow Piper Cub, and that was the thrill of my life there.
Wow.
To fly in the plane, I had to go get my parents to give me a permission, but.
So the first time you saw Blacksburg
saw
from the sky.
Blacksburg from the air, yeah.
Wonderful. So let's go back to your school. When you sneaked out, how did you get out? I mean, that was a small.
Well, actually,
cafeteria.
Stribbles Creek runs right through town. All right, there are two drains downtown by the old school, which is now is it Architect Annex? That was the first through third grade was in the first building. Fourth grade in the cafeteria was in the center building. And then 5th, 6th, and 7th grade was in the big building, the old high school. Well, there's 2 drains there on both sides. It was Strubles Creek runs under, and well, we just sort of walk into there and walk under the street over to Squires to the student activity building, and that was one way you could get out and get back in.
You walked under the drain
Yeah, right.
to different parts of Blacksburg.
Well, you could get across the street and off the property.
And you did that right from
And it wasn't just me. I mean, there were a bunch of us that did that pretty
right from
regularly.
the recess area. You could
Yeah,
get to that.
later they did block it all off, but we found a way.
Oh, that is really interesting.
You know, that's the flood plan of Squires was to open the front door of that Donaldson Brown, to open the back door and let the water run through it. And that's right where when they had the big flood here about 20 years ago, that was what happened.
That's where the creek was.
Right. The creek still runs through downtown. I mean, under the old mill building, if you went under Gillies, in the back when it's flooding, you could hear the water running. You still can. I mean, it's moving through underneath the buildings. It'll be a miracle if it doesn't sometime. From Sharkey's to that building, it's pretty scary. And inside the walls of the creek right now, there are like horseshoes put in where they reinforced it. I know a friend of mine, Jim Fothauer, they did some work on reinforcing the building. They put the old horseshoes from the stables into the side of the building. Old millstones from the mill, they're underneath into the sides. I have pictures of that.
In the sides of the mill building.
The old mill building, right under Bolo's.
So, and that was the old mill building because at one time it was a mill.
It was a mill, sure. Reliance Mill.
Reliance Mill.
Mr. Plank, when Planks owned the building, Blacksburg Realty, and I don't know what the other one was. They owned the building. They were, it was, I don't know if you remember Mr. Plank or not.
Yes.
Plank's Farm.
Yes.
He was another great person. This guy he'd do anything at Plank's Farm for people. He'd let churches go out there, groups, picnics. It was a lot of good guy.
Just for the record, Plank's Farm is in Ellet Valley.
Hans Farm now.
It's now called Hans Farm.
Well, I think it's called Walnut Grove,
Okay.
but the Hans own it.
And
Let's
it's
see.
beautiful with the Roanoke River going
Oh, it
by.
is. It is.
It's wonderful.
So
He owned the mill building, and they decided to cover the creek apparently at some point.
well, it was always covered there, but Water Street or Draper Road, it was open for a long time. It comes through town like a snake, really. It's from up at where the Brownstone is.
Mm-hmm.
It would cross there. It comes right down next to the Four Chimneys.
Yes.
I swear I remember seeing goldfish on Main Street right next to where what's the hotel over here? The Blacksburg, right on Main Street.
The present hotel?
The one that's there now, yes.
I don't know.
I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, I remember seeing goldfish in there and I've asked several people about it, and I've had other people say yes, it was there. I don't know if they just dug it out or what, but that's Strubles Creek, all the way down under the buildings. I don't have the map of that. Somebody gave me that once, the map of Strubles Creek where it comes through town. It's pretty interesting.
That is interesting. So you were a downtown guy
Always.
as a child, even though you lived way out there in Airport Acres.
Well, I had my Schwinn bike.
Your Schwinn.
I would ride my bike into town, and yeah, I was a downtown. I don't know. Just a lot of kids played downtown. Should have been studying, I guess. Playing baseball.
What did you do when you played downtown?
We'd go to different stores, play pinball. I'd run through the dime store. We had a Rose's 5 and 10 downtown, right on College Avenue and Main Street. You'd go in on Main Street, come out on College Avenue, right next to the Lyric. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
What were the two ladies that worked in the candy section?
I don't know.
Two sisters.
Two sisters.
They worked in the candy section.
I have no idea.
I'm sure they probably remember me.
You were there often. Do you remember their names?
Not present.
Okay.
I don't think I should
That's
say.
really. I do recall the floors were wooden.
Wooden floors, and they get
oil.
down.
They
Right.
oiled them down to keep the
Now,
dust
where was the
down.
toy section?
And there were different rises, different levels in that building.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a small compartmentalized.
It's a miracle that place never burned down.
It is.
Oil the floors
Oil
down.
the floors with sawdust.
In fact, let's see. The manager there is the last manager. I think it was Mr. McMahon. I think that's who it was.
I think so.
But you know, there was
You were-
another
you-
toy
You were
shop.
on a first name relationship with a lot of the merchants.
Oh, later on, sure.
And the people who worked
Right.
there.
Oh, I mean, I was always into science fair, and that's where knowing Mr. Harden was always good because I'd make my little rockets that would blast from one end of the school, the room to the other end.
So you were an early October sky guy.
You know, my science fair project was to measure the thrust of a jet engine,
No.
and I won the science fair here, the local, and I went to state with that.
What
My buddy
year was
Ted
that?
Elmore, he did he made a wind tunnel, so you know we were into that type of stuff.
Aerospace engineering.
But I would get carried away, and I'd like to make a carbide cannon every once in a while. So that, you know, later on, a tech would fire their cannon. It was nothing compared to mine. I mean, it was like a pop gun going off. I'd take a piece of drain pipe and put a little carbide down in it, and I'd blow that thing and blow newspaper up, and it looked like Hiroshima out here.
Oh wow! You were a fun guy.
I mean,
to partner with.
that was for football games, you know.
Yeah.
When we moved from Airport Acres to Southgate Drive, 62, my dad we were right on the outskirts of Blacksburg, right on the end of Southgate. And then, of course, it didn't take long, we were right over the hill, right on Chicken Hill, which is right next to where they built the stadium later on.
Right. Right. You were
So we
close to the original stadium and very
were,
close.
right, Miles Stadium.
To the present.
Oh, Miles
lane.
Stadium was great. We'd watch, go watch football games and play on the hill. But back to downtown. Let's see. We got our drug stores covered. We got our hardware stores. We had our men's shops. We had a women's shop. Leonard Brown. That was
Talk
probably
a
the
little bit
oldest in
about the
church.
hobby shop,
The hobby shop was great. That
which was up on the hill.
I
right?
think Mr. Brown ran the hobby shop, Willard Brown, and you'd go in there, you could buy models for $1. I delivered News Messenger, Blacksburg Sun, whatever paper, the Roanoke, well, I never did the Roanoke Times for a long time, but to make money to go, get something at the hobby shop.
And did they help you with your science projects and give you ideas, or
Probably not.
you
I mean, he had balsa wood, so you could make things.
and a lot of models, and this was
Lots of models.
post
And
World War II, so a lot of military influence in
Right.
childhood.
those little motors. Well, sure, we'd buy the little gas motors for the airplanes, and we'd always try to fly those. I was probably more interested in making a rocket than I was of flying a airplane around a circle, but
Where did you shoot your rockets off? Did you have a
backyard.
favorite place?
Yeah, backyard.
Which at that time was
Yeah,
relatively
you were
rural.
right on. Yeah, that was, that's about the time I quit all that, and I think the last time the police said, you better not blow any of that stuff up again.
In those days, it was a warning.
Right. You can never do it today, that's for sure.
Yes.
Well, what other stores do you remember downtown? I mean, the sports center. Now that
The
was,
sports center.
oh yeah, Orville Hammond.
Talk a little bit about sports
Oh,
center.
you could go in there and get the best hamburger that Blacksburg has ever had. TDC. at the sports center.
And there were
It was a
billiard
big
tables in the back.
pool tables in the back. Well, we had, let's see, how many pool halls? We had Smody's, which was behind the Hokie House on the left. That was another place that poor old Mr. Quisenberry, he'd have to come out there and get us. High school, we'd be skipping school. But no, the sports center was great.
Mm-hmm.
Orville Hammond.
Orville Hamlin. Lot of socialization, and it interacted with the college students in the town
Right.
very well. Now, where did you get your haircut?
Nice pinball machine there too.
Nice pinball.
Haircut? Well, I guess that would be Mr. Johnson at the SAB.
Oh, at the
They had a barber shop in the back.
Mm-hmm.
75 cents.
75.
Might have gone up to $1. I don't know. 75 cents, I remember.
And there was Modern Barbershop up.
Modern barbershop
Hobby
was
shop
down at the
area.
bottom, right by the Greeks.
And then there was
Mr. Sears, the Ideal Barbershop.
Ideal Barbershop.
Mr. Sears, and let's see, was it his father, John? I remember that because there was a picture in there of three guys playing poker or checkers. And maybe 20, 25 years ago, I heard Mr. Sears, and I said, "What do you know about that picture?" And he mailed it to me.
Oh, no, wonderful.
So I still have that.
And that
was
was inside the barbershop.
Inside the barbershop. Mr. Sears would say that you'd walk by and he'd sit there and he'd be clicking those
Yes.
scissors as you walk by and, saying hi to you. See, you knew everybody in every
Yes.
store. That was the whole idea of it. Downtown Blacksburg is
Right.
a friendly town, and it was full of business. I mean, you had a place to park. You could park vertical on the streets. I mean, there was always, you could find a place to park.
Yes. It was fun.
We
place to be.
we had more stores, retail stores, because this is right before. We'll go back to the stores. There, we had jewelers. We had Mr. Hummel had Hummel's Jewelry.
Hummel's Jewelry.
Mr. Dickerson, he had Dickerson's Jewelry. He was right on the corner of the old mill building. Who else?
I don't remember because I didn't go to jewelry stores very often, but I knew they were.
Well, I didn't either, but I knew
Yeah,
that
it was interesting at that point.
different restaurants downtown. College Inn, that was Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Granny.
Yes.
Oh, what a great, I have in my pictures there, but
Homemade food.
she would take care of the sports, different teams, football team, basketball team, wrestling team. She would feed them all.
That's great. Was the diner on College Avenue when you were a kid?
That was Meredith Restaurant.
Meredith's restaurant?
Ralph Meredith ran it. That was another place. Good nickel pinball machine. You could sneak out on the right side, and you could go straight to that. Again, hot dog, probably 15 cents. Coke, a nickel. And you get a nickel to play the pinball machine.
Covered your lunch and your entertainment.
There you go.
And you came back from lunch feeling better than anybody.
I felt great.
That's good. And then
It just, when you'd get into school, where have you been? Oh, I had to take care of some business. Well, see, it probably helped because my mother taught first grade. From first grade on, she taught at the Beulah Klein. She taught at the first grade downtown. Then she went to Margaret Beeks. But
Oh, really?
from 3 weeks after we moved here, she got a job teaching first
Oh,
grade.
okay.
She'd always taught. Yeah.
Okay, so thousands of Blacksburg
Oh, they all knew Beulah.
students knew her.
Yeah, well, she's still, mother's 97.
97. That's wonderful.
See, I'm only
Wonderful.
65. I got a couple weeks left. I hope.
That's really great. So, what about your transition into adolescence and teenage years?
I'm still training. I'm still changing it. We hope
We're
to
in the
progress.
middle of that.
Yeah. 65. That's probably a good.
So when did you get your first car? Or have
Oh my
transportation?
goodness, we don't. Well, we do. Cars have always been a part of my life. I think I taught my sister how to drive when I was 12 at
You
my
did?
uncle's.
Your older sister.
My older sister, my uncle's farm. We would go there, and I would drive the Rambler. My dad bought Ramblers. I mean, he'd buy Ramblers. Never had any hot cars. I mean, a 6-cylinder straight drive, 3 on the tree. That was it. I bought my first car. Well, let me take that back. Ted Elmore, Sandy Moore, and I had a car way before I had a license. But that's as far as that story should go.
Certain stories
Okay.
end.
In high school, well, when 15, I think you could get your license. I bought a Rambler.
A Rambler.
I bought a Rambler.
Like father, like son.
And it was a piece of junk. But I had the Rambler. Then I had a bunch. I had 17 cars before I got out of high school that
Wow.
I had bought, sold, traded. One of them, I remember it only lasted 2 weeks, and I had to push it all the way back to Roanoke with my dad's car, Rambler.
Did you buy these cars from individuals or?
Oh no, from a lot.
Which
You make enough
dealerships
on-
did you like to work with?
What now?
Which car dealerships did you?
That was Friendly Motors in Roanoke.
Friendly Motors.
But we'd buy cars, Volkswagen. I had a Volkswagen convertible, an orange 58 Volkswagen convertible that when later on going to high school, when you'd, want to take recreation and toward the end of the day, leave a little bit early,
Early dismissal.
go to Pandapus Pond, load it up, all my buddies, Mike Waller and Sharon Fenton, and we'd all go out there, Heather Fight. We'd go Rhonda Cromer. We'd go swimming. We'd go to Pandapus Pond,
That's great.
And I remember one time, Mr. Wiley, great man. I mean, he said, well, they probably got more exercise there than they would at school.
Yes. Mr. Wiley, coach and teacher.
Yeah, right. This was
Blacksburg High.
Alan Wiley.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, he said they probably got more exercise there than they did sitting around school.
There's a philosophical approach.
It was the last period of the day, and if it wasn't, we might actually take off a little early. But
So you continued this needing to escape from school activity.
I never liked school. I never did. I didn't like school. You put up with it, but I would just as soon be somewhere else.
Yes.
And many times I was.
Well, what teachers or people really inspired you or made a
Robert
difference?
Turner. Robert Turner, the artist. When we had him in 7th grade, anybody, when he'd go, he'd draw these big crustaceans on the board, and you'd see those, and you had to remember the parts of them. I mean, you just had to. He was a real teacher. I mean, this guy was great. Still is.
So he taught science? Or
He taught
art?
science, right?
And how did that impact you?
Well, that was the year the last year at the old school downtown. That was 7th grade. I remember stringing from one end of the top of the stairs of the school to the other, putting a wire and making a rocket. And I blasted that thing from the one end all the way to the other. When it hit the wall, it was in a million pieces. That was my science fair project. And it was, well, I had to make another one, but it was pretty good. But he would always encourage you. And then going on to 8th grade, Mrs. Deemer, we'd let out helium balloons from 7th grade with notes on them. We'll give you a quarter if you find this. I got a letter back from Bassett, Virginia that was pretty neat.
From Mrs. Deemer's science
class.
8th grade.
That's Mrs. Deemer. That's Bill Deemer's mother, I guess. Yeah.
I think so, yes. So you must have been really excited.
I was always into anything that would move, that's what cars and motorcycles are more like trail bikes. That was
And
all.
you seem to be, would you consider yourself a high-risk child, or what were you doing? You were just following your bliss with all of these activities?
I don't know how my parents ever put up with this. I mean, I just did a lot of things I liked doing, and those, they'd encourage you to try to do different things. Like my dad, he grew corn on the side of the road. Okay, we sold corn on Southgate Drive. If I could, strawberries, corn, anything, if I'd grow it, I'd make some money off of it. Well, that was great. After he's long gone, one day I parked 10 cars Southgate for the football game, and I got $10 a piece. That was $100. Now, you know how many strawberries and things of corn you have to grow to get $100?
A few baskets.
It's a lot of work. So we continued our tailgate football parking, which I do today.
So all these years,
Thank you, Dad.
your father has left that legacy.
Between delivering papers, anything, you'd make a buck. Now here's a good one. Carol Lee, the king.
Yes, Carol King.
Carol King.
Now Carol Guest.
On Airport Acres, I shined shoes. I had my little shoe shine box, and I went up and down the street, and I think I destroyed a pair of shoes for Carol's sister. She had those black and white Oxford shoes, those black and white. Well, I wasn't very neat, and I remember getting black on the white, but
Oh no.
but they didn't say a thing, and they gave me 15 cents, and
Wow. You were an entrepreneur from birth,
I
weren't you?
tried to. You want to do something, you make a little money, do what you
Yes,
can.
That's wonderful.
Blacksburg's been good to me,
Blacksburg has been good to you.
and I enjoy Blacksburg. I mean, it's selling. We started our own business here, John's Camera Corner, which I worked for Ewald Clark, which is a great place, a great camera store. I've always done pictures. I got into photography in high school. Actually in Boy Scouts with Maynard Hale. He got me into photography.
Maynard Hale.
Yeah, Maynard Hale. Lived on Airport Acres.
Okay.
And then
How did he get you into photography?
through Scouts.
Boy Scout.
Through Boy Scouts, right. We processed film. In fact, Dickie Cup sold my mother the first real decent camera that I had. I had others before that, but that was probably 58.
1958.
And I learned how to process film. I remember developing film over at Buddy Quarterman's house, and we from there on, just kept going. High school, I was a high school photographer. That was another good way to get out of school.
Oh, so you did yearbook and
Oh man, I would all that stuff. Mrs. Hummel. Mrs. Hummel would take me by the arm and say, "Come on, John, let's go check this out." So she was a historian. I mean, talk about somebody that knew Blacksburg. That woman knows Blacksburg, knew Blacksburg from one end to the other. And we would walk down the street and she'd tell me about things. And I was really getting into collecting pictures and stuff then.
Already.
Oh yeah.
So the historical aspect of it was largely introduced by Virginia Hummel.
Oh, very much so.
You're an English teacher at Blacksburg.
Yeah, she wasn't my English teacher. I would never have made it. I think Mrs. Cook was my English
Okay.
teacher.
Yes.
And she's just a really fine person too.
That's interesting. So the Boy Scouts. And
Boy Scouts
the
get into
early
that.
Camera, and then Mrs. Hummel.
Right. We went with the newspaper with the Blacksburg, what was it? News Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
News Messenger. I was photographing pictures for them. I do the sports games at
In
night.
high school.
In high school. Well, it got easier. You make $3 off a picture. You go deliver papers. Which you can do? I'd take the $3 picture. I mean, so I'd take pictures for the Messenger, and that worked great until. Well, I got two things. See, I'd get them for the high school, and then I'd sell pictures of the paper too, so I could do them both. Have my darkroom going, paid for.
So you took the pictures, you developed the pictures.
Stay up all night.
So you say you stayed up all night developing.
Developing, printing pictures. After a game, then I'd sell pictures to the kids, the cheerleaders, the players, the papers, everybody. I always had pictures of what was going on. If you could make $1. I'll never claim to be any great photographer, but I did sell my. When I pushed that button, there was usually $1 behind it.
$1 a push.
Every time you took a picture, tried to have a sale for it.
And so you must have been very proficient at developing and processing.
I was.
The film. Early.
That later on, I worked Tech Photo Lab 2 summers. That they would hire the photographer for Blacksburg in that, so I did that. Later on, did the Barn Dinner Theater, take pictures, get to eat while going to Virginia Western, watch a play. Even got in a play once. Went from that, Ewald Clark, Ewald Clark, he hired me. I was selling him pictures. And Mr. Ewald Tank, he hired me. He said, well, I like the way you sold it to me. So he hired me.
Now, that was what kind of business was Ewald Clark?
Camera store.
That was the camera store.
Right. This got into more of the selling of
And you
photography.
sold him pictures
I sold him pictures.
before he hired you.
Right. That's how I got my job.
Where was that store?
Ewald Clark in Roanoke.
Okay.
That was another way to get off a couple hours early. Well, I got to go get some supplies. We don't have anybody around here that has them, so leave school a little early, go to Roanoke.
That's great.
I was the youngest customer they ever had with a charge account. But back to the News Messenger, doing pictures for them. One time we had a tornado came through Blacksburg. I went out and photographed that tornado, the path of it, where it picked up a trailer, put it over a fence without knocking the fence down. Went and told the News Messenger, oh, yeah, we don't believe that. We get Bill Hall was the photographer there, get him photographed. I said, yeah, right. I took those negatives, took them to Roanoke. The next morning, front page, Roanoke Times, World News, photos by John Kline. Tornado hits Blacksburg,
So what was your next?
O.C. Strawn saw those. This is Michael's mother. And says, John, you're fired. They paid me $25 for those pictures. So that next bar up and taking pictures. More money.
More pictures. So pictures were money, and you enjoyed it.
Oh, I did. I remember Paul Jewell had Tech Studio, and I think it was somebody turned me in for not having a business license in Blacksburg. Oh, my dad went ballistic on that one. He went ballistic. He said, well, you grow corn, you don't have to have a license, Anyway, I got a business license back when I was probably 15, 16, 17. I don't know what it was, but I got a real early license then. But anyway, from downtown to taking pictures, Ewald Clark, I started there 74, I think it was about 74. I bought Gentry Studio across the street, and I ran to both of them. I did work for Ewald Clark, and I'd run across the street and take pictures for Gentry Studio after I got that. Anyway, that didn't last too long. They didn't like the idea of that. So
Now the Gentry Studio was like portraits.
Portraits. They lost the tech contract, and that was about 75. And, well, I bought it.
You bought it.
Art Canoyer, he ran Gentry Studio, and he said, well, I'll sell it to you for $15,000. $15,000. Now, I never had $500. I might have had $500 in the account. I said, oh, that's good. I said, Art, can you loan me $5 on that? He said, finance part of it? And he said, yeah, that'd be fine. I said, $10,000. I went up to the National Bank and said, okay, I've saved up $10,000. I'm going to give you, I need some money to start. Can you loan me $5? He did. Took it back to Art, gave him $5. However it started, we started the business with $500. And that's when photography was, it was really, taking pictures was the thing. We started as a studio. Well, when they fired me from Ewald Clark, it wasn't the studio. I started John's Camera Corner. I put up meat paper across the window, said, "Coming soon, John's Camera Corner." And I knew all the reps, and oh man, Ewalds hated. They just were furious, didn't know what to do. So anyway, I started my camera store. I was right next to Richard Walters' Book, Strings and Things, and I had a studio in the back and a little camera store in the front. And that went over real well. We got into processing several years later, a lot later. Rental dark rooms, studio, weddings. I did weddings every week. You know, you do weddings, 2 weddings a weekend. I mean,
Very busy. Business was good.
it was before, you know, nobody had a cell phone to take a stupid picture with a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
You were taking pictures. And then we got into processing, and while processing was big, it was big. We got our own processors, and oh man, that was big time. And then all that died out, and that's when the mom and pop camera store pretty much died in 19 probably 87, 88, somewhere in that range. It just completely died, 90s maybe. I'd go to the marketing shows. They'd tell us what's going on, what you're going to do to survive. Yeah, right. Survival in Blacksburg is you have to be one ahead of them, you know, on everything. Because when the photo finishing went out, we're done. You know, I sold used cars. I always have sold things, but my tailgate football parking, thank God for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anyone that doesn't get involved in football in Blacksburg is a fool. I mean, this town is a football town, and I am so glad for Frank Beamer and all he's done for everything here.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can say about that. I enjoy the football and what you can do from the football, what it brings to Blacksburg.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we're into vinyl records now. That's our newest thing with the cameras, and it goes well together, sight and sound.
Sight and sound. So how did the synergy with Book, Strings and Things work?
Oh, Book, Strings and Things was great. I mean, they were right next to us. Mish Mish was on the other side. We had it for 18 years right there.
Tell everybody what Book, Strings and Things
BS&T, Richard Walters, bookstore, record store. Probably one of the best in the state. You remember BS&T? You could go in, sit down. It was just a great place.
A must visit.
Yes.
A must visit coming for all of us returning to town who lived away.
Richard Walters had by far, I mean, when he started in the back of where we were, where Bolus is, with a little potbelly stove, Richard was a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, he wasn't any, dummy. He knew what was going on. And he had this store that sold everything from strings to guitars to books, and then later on records and tapes.
And no one bothered you in there. You go in there and you could
Right.
just be in there and look around for hours.
That's right.
And so that worked well with your business next door.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd take my pictures, and I actually got into processing over there, but it wasn't until we moved up to the old Tech Motel and I had all that space on the right that I could put more junk out in that store. I mean, I had every room in there. The downstairs, I had it all.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Mr. Stern, who designed the Tech Motel building. He said, "Oh, this is you could knock the walls out. It's all, it's freestanding, the poured concrete." So I took a skill saw in there and I cut one of the walls out. Electricity still on, went right through a power line.
Oh,
And pushed the wall over. I showed him from Blue Ridge and said, "Look there, nothing fell in." And then I needed to build windows in the front. I traded Hedlesky. He wanted. I had this bike that I bought somewhere at a pawn shop. So I don't know where I bought it. Anyway, it was a mountain bike for him to cut out the 2 front windows in the store. This was, let's do it, get it done. We'll talk about it later. I think I must have forgotten to get a building permit, but we put those up and, you know, it was done.
And you were.
We were open. We were open in a
That's-
week.
Was that store the former office of the Tech Motel or what?
No, the office of the Tech Motel was to the right where Benny's is now.
Oh, okay.
That was another one that Mr. Stern designed. Had pictures of them laying on the ground with the plywood over the top of it. And step 3 was the man to back away from underneath it to make the wooden form.
Interesting. And you were in that store for how long?
I was on the right side for 11 years, on the left side where the Benny's is for 7. I've been downtown 38 years, 39 years,
Wow. And so
and still going.
Mrs. Hummel got you interested in history.
In the
and you
history.
saw some value in that.
Well, we'd take the pictures ahead of Blacksburg, and we'd walk around and look at the roof design and stuff and say, well, this is where that was, you know, this is definitely like where Big Al's is. Yeah, it was the early lyric, first lyric, and yeah.
So you are interested in history. Are you a historian by virtue of being a photographer, or are you a photographer by virtue of being a historian?
I don't know. I'm interested in Blacksburg and the pictures. If I have them, that's great. Share them with everybody.
And
I don't call it my collection. It's just pictures that I've put together that whenever I copy a picture, if there's something there that I want, I save one. And we have them online. We put all our pictures on my website.
And then when did you start collecting historic pictures of Blacksburg and Blacksburg life?
I don't know. Just if something comes through, I'm gonna save it tomorrow.
Yes. And these, like for instance, we have pictures here of the old railroads and different things. You want to hold up and show?
Okay.
So you actually took some of these pictures, or you purchased?
Some of them, but like here was the last day of the Huckleberry. I don't know if this is
The last day of the Huckleberry.
right in Blacksburg,
Wow.
right through there. This is where Mr. Slusher would plant
Very good.
flowers in the middle of the track.
Yes.
This is Huckleberry after it's been restored.
That is, where
It's
is that Huckleberry
Strasburg,
now?
Strasburg, Pennsylvania.
Strasburg, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, goes 7 miles a day.
I've ridden on that. That might have been a Huckleberry engine. Oh my goodness.
It was. I mean, they changed 475. I think I don't remember what the number. You can see it on there. There were actually 2 or 3 trains. I have 2 of them in one of these pictures. But that was at our station downtown. That's a picture Mr. Shelton took. I always thought that was me on my Schwinn bike, but I think that was Gar Presto.
So you actually know who a lot of these people are. And so you came by a lot of these pictures by buying collections or
No,
prints
just-
or
We copy photographs in the store for people all the time. If somebody had pictures of Blacksburg and I was copying them,
You
I
kept-
made one copy for myself.
And so
And it was used, I always talked to them. They always said, that's fine.
and that's wonderful. So how do you feel now that so much emphasis is being placed on the history of Blacksburg and
Well, it's great. We've wanted this Black House for a long time. We need a museum. I mean, I have things in the store like a slot machine out of Blacksburg, 1936. It was in the Greeks restaurant when Roosevelt closed down on illegal gambling. You know, Greeks, Nick being an immigrant, he didn't want to have that in his store. So he sold it to Reed Harden. Well, Reed's wife wouldn't hear of it. So he put it in the basement of Western Auto. And it wasn't until I photographed Reed's daughter's wedding, and he said, how much? I said, what do you mean? How much for the wedding? I traded him the slot machine for it. I had it refurbished. It's in the middle of my store.
a priceless treasure?
I have things like stirrups out of the livery stables downtown. I have one of those. You know, we need a place to put things eventually. I remember a guy coming in one time that had a buggy that was made in Blacksburg, and I didn't know didn't have a place to put a buggy, but you know, it had right on the Blacksburg.
Wow.
And on that one picture, the carriage builders in Blacksburg, you know, we had one of those downtown. So
Wow.
it's good to have a museum. I don't know where we're going to keep everything, but
You're right now having difficulty storing so much, aren't you?
I have a couple buildings that I have all kinds of junk in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. And so you're continuing to this day to keep and document a lot of what's going on in
Well,
Black.
sure. Yep.
And you would see maybe as an ultimate goal a place to display and so the public can have access to some of these
Oh, I think so.
old treasures.
Well, with the internet now, you can put everything online. You know, anybody can go online and get any pictures I have.
How do you feel about that?
That's fine. I mean, it's like I said, it's not my collection. I've just put them together.
Yes. And would I be remiss in saying that you probably have the largest collection of
Oh, I don't know
Blacksburg
about
history?
that. I think Special Collections at Tech does.
They have
They used to, we'd copy pictures. They used to borrow pictures I had. I think they have. I have a lot of pictures. Now, a lot of people, when they're doing a book on Blacksburg, they'll come through and they'll ask you about pictures, and I always make them available. That's why when people bring me pictures, they know that I'm not gonna hoard them and just say this is all mine. It's for the town,
That's wonderful.
and that's why I get a lot of pictures that I do.
So a lot of those skills that you started developing when you were a little tyke have carried you well through the rest of your life.
Oh, I'm glad something has.
Buying, selling, dealing.
I don't know if you could do this, you know, today, but I enjoyed it. Still do.
And tell us a little bit about your store now.
We have vintage cameras. I mean, we have still a bunch of film cameras. I have an old photo booth that I've got to get going again. I had it over at Rivermill, and the architect department has it right now. They were trying to fix it, but I'm going to get it going again. It'll be back. It's an old, you know, you sit down, take the 4 pictures for $1. Well, it used to be for a quarter.
That's great. That would be wonderful.
That was one of my son and I drove to. Well, we went to Canada and brought it back.
Wow.
I've had it for 5 years, but I have lots of old film cameras that Radford uses it. Virginia Western, they still teach photography. Concord College, they still teach photography. Hollins, it's now that there's nobody else that's into the film cameras like that other than internet and eBay, which I sell on eBay also. There's a whole demand there. Old Polaroid cameras. I love old Polaroid cameras. I have all the film, all the instant cameras, all instant gratification. You know, a lot of people want that. It's coming back to that.
Interesting.
That, and now records, vinyl records. You know, I never bought 10 records in my life until about 3 years ago. I probably got 6,000.
6,000.
Well, yeah. And they're buying them more all the time. I'm always looking for vinyl records. I don't know how long this is going to last, you know. But right now, it's good.
So what are people buying? Any genres that are particularly interesting for
Well, classic rock.
classic rock?
Some jazz. You know, my son likes reggae.
So
I like some country. I mean, I like a little everything too because it's a new ball game for me. You know, playing an old Pink Floyd record or
Yes. That's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your coming in to the Alexander Black
Well,
House
thank
and
you.
sharing your very interesting and entertaining history with us. And is there anything you'd like to say for posterity?
Don't try this yourself.
Well, thank you very much. This is John Kline, and we here at the Alexander Black House really appreciate your contribution to history and Blacksburg, and you've enriched the town tremendously.
Well, thank you.